He stopped a thief. They fired him anyway. On Black Friday, the store didn't open. It exploded. By 5:02 a.m., carts were crashing into glass doors. Mothers barked orders at kids half asleep in pajamas. Teenagers sprinted ahead of the security ropes, treating retail like a battleground. The only thing louder than the music was the hunger in people's eyes. And somewhere between the aisles of chaos, David Brooks pushed his mop and watched. He looked invisible, just as they wanted him to be. Blue jumpsuit, faded cap, janitor badge clipped to his hip. No name, just a number. No one cared who he was, and that was exactly the point. Every morning since November 1st, he clocked in at 4:45 a.m., mopped up spills, scrubbed restroom stalls, restocked paper towels. Customers ignored him. Co-workers mocked him. Managers barked orders like commands to a trained dog. "Sir, can you clean this faster? Buddy, don't block the aisle. Hey man, maybe let the real staff handle the customers." He never argued, never corrected them, never showed a hint of who he was, but his eyes missed nothing, like the boy in the gray hoodie who'd walked past electronics 4 times. Like the floor manager, Kyle, who skipped camera reviews every Monday. Like the cashier with perfectly timed breaks, always when high-ticket items went missing. David had been quietly building a case. Until that morning, when it all boiled over. It happened near the headphones display. A teenage boy, white, confident, smooth, picked up a pair of earbuds, glanced around, and slid them into his coat pocket. Seamless, like he'd done it before. David stepped forward, voice calm, eyes steady. "You dropped something," he said, gently motioning towards the boy's coat. The boy blinked. And then, with the timing of a street performer, raised his voice to full volume. "Why are you harassing me?" Heads turned. 2 shoppers stopped pushing carts. A woman clutched her purse. The store froze, just long enough for Kyle to swoop in like a scripted response. "What's going on here?" "He grabbed me," the teen snapped, louder than before. David didn't flinch. "I didn't touch him." Kyle didn't ask for proof, didn't check the cameras, didn't even look at the merchandise. He looked at David, his clothes, his skin, his status, and made a decision. "You're done. Turn in your badge. I don't care what you thought you saw. We don't tolerate confrontation, especially not on a day like this." David's jaw tensed. His hands gripped the mop a little tighter. Not in anger, but in recognition. This wasn't new. He glanced at the boy, who was already backing away, headphones still in his coat. "You're firing me. For stopping a thief?" Kyle shrugged. "For making a customer feel unsafe." A few claps. A cheer from the peanut gallery. One voice even muttered, "Should have known better." David nodded once. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He turned. Walked past the registers. Past the stacked TVs. Past the flashing signs that screamed sale. As the sliding doors opened to the freezing morning air, he tapped a button under his collar and spoke. "Target confirmed. Theft witnessed. Manager complicit. Uploading now." Because David Brooks wasn't just a janitor, he was a former head of corporate security. And today, he was back. Not to clean the floors, but to clean the rot they thought would never be exposed. By the time David Brooks clocked in at 4:45 a.m., the air inside the store was already thick, smelling of sweat, caffeine, plastic, and desperation. It was the kind of morning where rules got blurry, faces turned sharp, and being invisible was the safest thing a man like him could be. The lights were too bright. The shelves were already half empty. The chaos wasn't coming. It was here. David moved through it with practiced rhythm. His cart rattled softly across the linoleum, stacked with bleach, rags, mop heads, and gloves. The only sound louder than the mop's swipe was the quiet mockery of being overlooked. A mother stormed past, dragging 2 kids. A man yelled into his phone, "If they're out of PS5s, I'm suing someone." 2 employees argued near the break room, one still half-zipped into their red uniform. Nobody looked at David. Not the customers, not the co-workers, not even the store cameras. And that was exactly what he needed. Because David wasn't just cleaning floors. He was listening, watching, recording. Every inch of his uniform had been rigged by his own hands. Hidden mic beneath the collar, lens inside the janitor badge, sensor behind a loose thread on his glove. It wasn't company-issued. It was federal-level discreet. The kind of surveillance you couldn't buy online. "David!" barked Kyle's voice behind him, sharp and impatient. "Aisle 11, spill, again, move fast." Kyle was everything the store wanted to promote. Young, white, clean haircut, high-performing. He managed with his jaw clenched and his eyes always 2 seconds away from rolling. David knew the type. Corporate clay, molded for profit, not people. "Yes, sir," David said softly. He turned the cart toward aisle 11, where a trail of melted slush and gummy bears ran down the center tiles like a toddler's accident. A group of teens laughed as they walked away, one of them flicking a plastic wrapper into a shelf for fun. As David knelt to clean, one of the stock boys passed behind him and muttered, "Living the dream, huh?" David didn't answer, but he noted the tone and the smirk. This store wasn't just careless. It was comfortable in its hierarchy. 3 weeks ago, he'd been assigned to this location after internal loss reports crossed a certain threshold. Merchandise, high-end electronics mostly, was disappearing from the inventory. Not from the shelves, but from the system. Discreet, quiet, covered. Worse, 5 different camera angles had reportedly malfunctioned in the last month. The thefts weren't random, they were systemic. David wasn't supposed to intervene. He was supposed to observe, gather proof, identify the pattern. But when it became racial, when it became personal, holding back started to feel like betrayal, especially the day he saw Jamal get pulled aside. Jamal was 22, black, night shift, always early, always working double. David had watched him for a week, moving pallets, unloading crates, signing sheets without complaint. But that morning, David spotted him surrounded by 2 men in plain polos with asset protection lanyards. "What's in the box, Jamal?" "Cables. They told me to restock audio." "So why is the case empty?" Jamal frowned. "It wasn't when I grabbed it. You can check the camera." One of the men exchanged glances. "That feed was overwritten. Same excuse, again." Jamal's jaw tensed. "I didn't touch anything. Corporate's gonna want a report." David had seen enough. He walked away, pretending not to hear, but pressed the inside of his glove once, activating the recording tag. He logged everything. Time, date, voice samples. He had 4 other recordings like it. Different people, different departments. Same outcome. They weren't just losing merchandise. They were blaming the wrong people for it. People who looked like him. And someone upstairs was letting it happen. Back near the registers, a pair of cashiers shared a laugh over a TikTok. One of them looked at David and whispered, "He's always creeping around, man. I swear he's got no life." David didn't react. He wiped down a nearby surface, listened, logged. Later, by the loading dock, Kyle made his rounds again. This time, more smug. "Let's try something new today, Brooks. Try not looking like you're profiling customers, all right? Just stick to your mop." David blinked once. Understood, because that's what they expected from men like him. Obedience, silence, disposability. But what Kyle didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that David had designed the store's original security system 10 years ago. Back when he still wore a suit and trained the very people now calling him just a janitor. They thought they knew his position, but they had no idea he'd chosen this angle. to see the whole board, and they were standing right in the center of the trap. The store hit peak madness at 7:12 a.m. The coffee from early birds had kicked in. The caffeine had fused with adrenaline. People weren't thinking anymore. They were reacting, moving with animal instinct. Grab, pay, shove, leave. Some didn't even pay. David Brooks had seen Black Friday before. He'd seen people trample a woman for a blender. He'd seen a man punch a kid over a flat screen. But this time, he wasn't here to watch chaos. He was here to catch the one thing that didn't look chaotic at all. It happened at aisle 7. Sleek, silent, too smooth, a white teenager, maybe 17, hoodie half-zipped, AirPods already in one ear, gliding past the security tags like they didn't exist. He wasn't browsing. He was hunting, scanning, calculating. He walked past the locked display, hovered for 3 seconds, checked his phone, then slipped a hand under his jacket. David saw it, clear as day. A $349 Bluetooth speaker, limited edition, gone in under 2 seconds. David pushed his cart forward, slow, steady. "Excuse me," he said calmly. "You may have dropped something." The teen froze. His eyes flicked up. Guilt met with arrogance. Then came the performance. "Get away from me! What are you doing?" Louder than needed, just loud enough. People looked. One cashier stopped mid-scan. A mother nearby instinctively pulled her child closer. David stayed composed. "I watched you pocket that speaker." "I didn't take anything. This guy's harassing me. He's accusing me because I'm white." David blinked. The room shifted. And then came Kyle. Kyle, in his red polo and perfect timing. Clipboard tight in hand. His footsteps fast and furious. "What's going on?" he snapped. Before David could say a word, the teenager jumped in, playing the victim like a script rehearsed. "He grabbed me, said I was stealing, he was in my face, I didn't do anything." David's voice was even. "Check the cameras, he took it from aisle 7, left pocket." Kyle didn't look at the cameras, didn't look at the product, didn't even look at the kid. He looked at David, and all David saw in his eyes was one thought. "This is a problem I can make disappear." "You're done," Kyle said flatly. "You're terminated, effective immediately." David didn't move. "You're firing me? For reporting theft? For escalating a situation with a guest? For racial profiling? For disrupting store flow during peak hours? And the cameras?" Kyle didn't blink. "The cameras won't help you." There it was again. The same line Jamal had heard. The same silence that covered theft after theft. And now it was pointed at David, because this time the janitor didn't stay in his place. A crowd had gathered now. 6 people, phones out. Some recording, some just watching the drama unfold. One woman whispered, "Why's the janitor getting fired?" Another shrugged. Maybe he said something racist. David stared at Kyle. "You're choosing his word over mine, without checking a single fact. I'm choosing what's best for the store. That line, not what's right, what's best." David nodded slowly. Then, with hands that didn't shake, he reached for his belt and unhooked his janitor badge. For a second, Kyle flinched, just barely, as if expecting something else. Something real. David placed the badge on the counter, turned, and walked away, but not before pausing at the door and tapping the side of his collar. "Live upload. Footage secured, target identified, manager interference logged." He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He just left the way he came in, calm, measured, silent. Only this time, the door didn't close behind a janitor. It closed behind a man who now had everything he needed. The cold hit harder than expected, not because the wind had picked up, but because walking out those doors felt like he had been erased. David didn't slam the exit, didn't argue, didn't look back. He stepped into the parking lot like a man leaving a battlefield he never signed up for. His reflection followed him in the glass doors, shrinking smaller and smaller with every step. until it disappeared entirely. A little boy pointed at him through the window and asked his mother, "Is that the bad guy?" She didn't answer. David walked past them, past the lines of carts and broken holiday banners flapping in the wind. His boots thudded against wet asphalt. No one offered him a ride. No one asked if he was okay. He wasn't surprised. The company had always been clear. Silence is smoother than truth. He opened the door of his old Toyota, sat down, and placed the janitor badge on the passenger seat. His hands rested on the wheel, unmoving. The sun hadn't risen fully, but the sky was already starting to glare, and still he didn't drive. Instead, he opened his phone, swiped left, accessed the private server. Dozens of video thumbnails appeared. Date-stamped, geotagged, each one a small window into the truth they tried to bury. One showed Jamal being accused. Another, a female employee being berated for asking about an inventory discrepancy. One clip even showed Kyle signing off on a refund that never existed. David clicked on the latest recording. His own voice filled the car. "Live upload, footage secured, target identified, manager interference logged." He turned the screen off. This wasn't for him. It was for something bigger. His phone buzzed. "Unknown number," he answered. "Phase 1 complete?" a voice asked. Calm. Older. Female. "Yes," David said quietly. "Got what we needed." "Backup?" "Already syncing, encrypted on 3 nodes." "Blowback?" He paused. "Only the usual. Fired in public. Called a threat. Treated like trash." The line went silent. Then it's working." David hung up. He didn't need comfort. He needed clarity. This wasn't the first time he'd been sacrificed for someone else's comfort. And it wouldn't be the last. Later that day, back at the off-site review center, he watched the raw footage play across a wall of monitors. There was no debate, no gray area, no misunderstanding. Theft had occurred. David had acted with restraint. Kyle had lied. A young analyst behind him, barely 22, pale and nervous, whispered, "Sir, this is a smoking gun." David shook his head. "It's not the gun that matters." "Then what does?" He turned, voice low. "It's who's been cleaning up the blood and being blamed for it. That's what hurt most. Not that they fired him, but that the system expected him to accept it. Like Jamal. Like the young woman. Like all the names that had gone into his file. The growing list of black and brown employees erased quietly, pushed out through policy, made to look like troublemakers, just for doing their jobs right. And the public? They never knew, because the camera footage always went missing. The reports were always inconclusive. The stories were always complicated. But David's footage was clean, sharp, undeniable. And this time, the narrative wasn't going to be corporate approved. That night, David returned to a house that didn't feel like home. The walls were quiet. No laughter. No questions. Just a photo on the mantel. His daughter, years ago, in a blue hoodie and tear-stained cheeks. He remembered the day they'd accused her of shoplifting candy. She was only 12. Security had dragged her into the back. Didn't call him, didn't call anyone. Just left her crying in a chair until she signed a paper she didn't understand. That's when something broke inside him. Not because they accused her, but because no one believed her when she told the truth. Not the manager, not the mall cop, not even the school counselor. Just like today, a white voice cried, "Wolf." A black man lost his job, and the world nodded and moved on. But not this time. David walked to the small safe in his hallway closet, pulled out a worn folder, sealed with a name on it. A name no one in the store had heard in years. D. Brooks, Security Division Commander, Tier X. He placed the folder on the table beside his laptop. Then he opened his email. Subject line, "Internal theft. Corporate breach. Final evidence enclosed." Attached, The full video, with audio transcript, employee IDs, timestamps, and names. All ready to send. He stared at the cursor blinking in the to field and typed just one address, chatbotretailergroup.com. Before he was a janitor, David Brooks wore a suit. Not an expensive one. Not the kind bought to impress, but the kind that fit a man who led quietly, who knew the names of every guard on duty and remembered the birthdays of the ones no one else did. He had once been the regional director of loss prevention. 5 states, 57 locations, 200 personnel under his watch. And then, one file changed everything. It was a routine audit. Inventory at a Southern California branch was off, over $80,000 in missing electronics within 4 months. David reviewed the logs himself. Patterns emerged. Footage went missing. Reports overwritten. When he raised concerns, his superior told him, "You're seeing too much." He pushed harder. The deeper he looked, the clearer it became. The thefts weren't just overlooked. They were covered up. Someone high up was moving money, funneling refunds, ghost returns, and mislogged items into a secondary account. He brought the case to the executive board. They responded by calling HR. Within a week, David was placed on indefinite leave. By the 2nd week, he was accused of misconduct. By the 3rd, he was gone. No lawsuit, no press, just silence. A cleanup job. 2 months later, his daughter was stopped at a retail store after school. 12 years old. Black hoodie. Box of mints in her pocket. Paid for. But they didn't check the receipt. They checked her skin. She sat alone for 90 minutes. Cameras off. No guardian called. When David arrived, she was shaking. Not crying, shaking. That's the moment he knew. This wasn't about policy. This was pattern. And patterns don't stop until someone breaks them. Back in the present, David closed his laptop. The email had been sent. Now came the harder part, waiting to see who would blink first. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small black box. Inside, a second phone. No GPS, no fingerprint scan. Just one contact saved. He tapped the screen. It rang twice. Then a voice answered. Calm. Professional. "Ready for phase 2? David nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Yeah. I sent the full drop to the CEO. No response yet. We're monitoring internal comms. They're circling." "Good." He hesitated. "I want to add something to the file." "You're off the clock, David." "Doesn't matter." He paused. "There was a girl, 12, years ago, accused of stealing candy at one of our stores. They locked her in the back. No footage, no report, no consequences." The voice on the line stayed quiet for a long beat. "What's her name?" He looked at the photo on the shelf. "My daughter." The silence broke with a soft sigh. "You still want them exposed?" "I want them erased." "Understood." The call ended. Later that evening, David met someone at a diner on the edge of town. Booth in the back. Low light. Nothing flashy. Across from him sat a woman in her 40s. Sharp eyes. Business casual. Tablet in one hand, manila folder in the other. She slid it across the table. "This is the list," she said. 37 employees across 7 stores, all fired under questionable circumstances. 81% Black or Latino. 65% cited vague customer discomfort or non-compliance with culture values. David flipped through the pages. Faces, names, dates, all erased. Like him. "I want full case review," he said. "Reinstate the ones who can be. Compensate the ones who can't." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Even though you are not officially part of this anymore?" David's voice was steel. "I never left." She nodded. "And what about Kyle?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, "Let the tape speak first. Then I'll decide if he gets to walk out, or be walked out." Back at the retail HQ, the CEO opened the email. He watched the footage silently. watched the theft, watched Kyle dismiss protocol, watched David stay calm. Then, at the end, David looking straight into the hidden lens and saying, "You fired the wrong man, but you're going to remember me now." The CEO didn't blink, but his hands moved, first to his phone, then to the legal team, and finally, to a name he hadn't seen in years. Brooks David? They told him to stay invisible. They told him to monitor quietly. They told him not to cause waves. But David Brooks wasn't built to watch injustice happen twice. Not after what they did to him. Not after what they did to his daughter. He had spent 3 weeks disguised as what the system always assumed he was. Disposable. Silent. Powerless. A man with a mop and no mouth. But now the mop was gone, and the evidence was undeniable. At 9:34 a.m., David walked through the front doors of the corporate regional office. No jumpsuit, no cart. Just a dark blazer, dress shirt, and steel gray slacks. His stride didn't scream authority. It radiated it. The receptionist blinked as he approached. "Can I help?" "David Brooks, Regional Lead, Enforcement Audit. I'm expected." Her mouth opened, then closed. She typed something into the system. Her eyes widened slightly. She stood. "Conference room B. They're already inside." Of course they were. The legal team, the internal audit manager, Kyle. Inside the room, the mood was split. 2 execs sat like statues. Clean suits, forced smiles. The internal compliance director stared at his laptop, not blinking. And Kyle? Kyle looked like he hadn't slept. David didn't sit down. He dropped a folder on the center of the table. Inside is a report, 38 pages, with evidence, audio, video, and personnel patterns of coordinated theft across 6 locations, and a pattern of racial targeting during disciplinary actions. No one spoke. He pointed at Kyle. "Your manager here falsely terminated an undercover auditor in public view after ignoring real-time evidence of theft." Kyle opened his mouth. "I didn't..." "You did." David's voice cut like ice. "You chose not to know." He turned to the execs. "I have footage showing deliberate override of security camera systems, manipulation of returns, and falsified loss logs. Some of those logs carry your signature." The younger one shifted. "We had no knowledge of..." "Then you weren't looking hard enough." He clicked a button on his phone. A screen on the wall lit up. Footage played, no commentary, just evidence. Kyle dismissing David's warning. David being fired. The stolen speaker in the teen's coat as he walked out of frame. It ended with a line from David. "Live upload, footage secured, target identified, manager interference logged." Silence filled the room. And then David said, "I'm not here for an apology." "Then what are you here for?" the audit director asked carefully. David looked at him. "I'm here to see who's still willing to protect this mess after the public sees it." By 11:15 a.m., the footage had been sent to HR. Legal, public relations. By noon, Kyle was suspended pending investigation. His badge revoked, his access shut down. David watched him walk out of the building. This time, he was the one with nothing to say. But David wasn't done. At 1 p.m., he stood in front of a wall-sized monitor in the internal control center. Behind him, a small, trusted task force. Diverse, experienced, personally selected. In front of him, a map of every store flagged in the original report. "Phase 2, he said quietly. "Full sweep." They nodded. Auditors dispersed. Investigations opened. Justice, long dormant, was waking up. And this time it wasn't whispering. At 5:42 p.m., David drove back to the store where it all started. He didn't walk in to reclaim a job. He walked in to finish what he'd started. He found Jamal near the loading bay. The young man looked up, surprised. "Mr. Brooks?" David smiled. "Just David. You weren't really a janitor, were you?" "I was everything they thought I wasn't." Jamal laughed softly, bitter but relieved. They tried to fire me last week. Said I had attitude. David nodded. They won't be saying that again. He handed him an envelope. What's this? Your reinstatement and a formal apology. Jamal looked stunned. You did this? No, David said. We did. You told the truth. I just made sure someone finally listened. That night, David sat on his porch as the sky turned dark. He wasn't proud. He wasn't triumphant. He was clean. For the first time in years, he felt like the mess wasn't his to carry anymore. It was theirs, and this time they'd have to mop it up themselves. They suspended Kyle, but he wasn't gone. Not yet. By Tuesday morning, his lawyer had already filed a defamation notice against the retail group and named David personally in a formal grievance. The charge? Targeted racial discrimination against a white employee. Yes, you read that right. They were flipping the narrative. Kyle claimed he had been set up by David, that the confrontation was an intentional trap, that the investigation had been biased, and that David was harassing white employees in positions of authority. It would have been laughable if it wasn't getting traction. By noon, a local tabloid had picked it up. Store manager suspended after confrontation with undercover janitor. But was he framed? A photo of Kyle's family was attached. His wife, his dog, a Christmas tree. There was no mention of the teen who stole the speaker. No footage, no context. Just a headline that bled sympathy. David watched it all unfold from his desk in the enforcement division. He didn't flinch, but he felt it. That old weight pressing against his ribs. This was the playbook. Flip the power dynamic. Make the black man the threat. Weaponize the word aggressive. Ignore the truth. One of the junior analysts looked up from his screen. They're trying to bury this, sir. David nodded. Let them try. He opened his laptop. The video files were already backed up in 4 places. He had receipts, timestamps, internal memos, compliance reports, even a flagged message from Kyle dated 2 months earlier. If anyone asks, just say we don't keep footage after 48 hours. That message alone was enough to terminate 5 careers. But David wasn't interested in revenge. He was interested in patterns, because Kyle was just a piece, a loud one, but not the root. Later that day, David received a meeting request from someone he hadn't seen in nearly 8 years. Thomas Lantry, Senior VP of Operations, the man who'd signed off on David's leave of absence all those years ago. He showed up 10 minutes early, in a $3,000 suit, hair perfectly trimmed, teeth too white to be trustworthy. David, he smiled, as if nothing had happened. It's been a while. David nodded. Not long enough? Lantry chuckled, lowering himself into the leather chair. Let's talk man to man. Man to corporation, David corrected. Let's keep the roles clear. Lantry sighed. Look, you've made your point. The Kyle situation, messy, but it's isolated. It's not isolated, David said flatly. You signed off on 4 terminated employees last year. All black, all falsely accused, all under your region. Lantry raised his eyebrows. You went digging. I never stopped digging. The smile vanished. What do you want, David? I want a systemic overhaul, he said, voice low but solid. Every store flagged for audit will be reviewed by a third-party legal team. Every termination in the last 3 years will be reinvestigated. And I want the internal footage policy changed, permanently. Lantry scoffed. That would cost millions. So does a class action lawsuit. Silence. Then, as if trying one last card, Lantry leaned in. You can walk away now, full severance, consultant title, NDA. We'll even let you shape the narrative. David stared at him, then leaned back slowly, and asked, What narrative do you think I haven't already shaped? That night, David released a short statement to a major journalist he'd once helped protect during a security breach. No drama, no sensationalism, just facts. What happened in store Wagon 118 wasn't an accident. It was a reflection. A mirror held up to a system that trains its people to smile at injustice while logging out the evidence. We're not here to burn it down. We're here to rebuild what they tried to bury. Within 24 hours, the footage was aired on 3 networks: The Speaker, The Lie, The Firing. Kyle's smirk, and David standing silent as the truth stood loud. Kyle's lawyer dropped the claim. Corporate issued a revised statement. Lantry was moved into retirement. And David? He didn't celebrate. He opened a folder marked Phase 3. Because this wasn't victory, it was just exposure. They called it a Community Accountability Forum. But really, it was damage control in a tailored suit. The retail giant, under increasing pressure from shareholders, public relations disasters, and internal whistleblower leaks, had no choice but to organize a public event, streamed live, to address systemic misconduct within select regional branches. The location? An upscale conference center in downtown Los Angeles. Spotlights, plexiglass stage, carefully selected panel, and a seat for David Brooks. He walked in wearing the same suit they once made him turn in. Badge reissued, clearance restored. But this time, he didn't come as an employee. He came as the man who made them listen. Across the stage sat HR executives, legal counsel, and 2 board members. Cameras clicked. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The moderator cleared his throat. "Mr. Brooks, would you care to summarize your findings for the public?" David didn't look at the panel. He looked into the camera. "There are over 200 names in this report," he began. "Workers, good ones, people of color who were targeted, erased, and replaced, under the guise of policy." He held up a small black badge. This gave me access to every hallway, every file, every security camera. But it didn't protect me from one thing: being seen as disposable. He turned to Kyle, seated 2 rows behind the panel with his lawyer. "I warned you that you were firing the wrong man. What I didn't say was, I wasn't the only one watching." A second screen behind the stage lit up. Live feed, real time, faces appeared. Former employees, Jamal, Maria from Arizona, Calvin from Ohio, even a woman named Lydia, fired 6 years ago after reporting theft. No one had heard from her since. One by one, they shared what had been hidden. Termination without process, security overrides, behavioral concerns with no documentation. Cameras always down when truth got too close. The room grew colder with each story. One board member whispered something to legal. Another looked pale. David stepped forward. "This is not just about one store or one manager. This is about a system that runs on silence and calls it efficiency." He paused. But silence doesn't protect you. It delays the reckoning. Then came the twist. The moderator hesitated before saying, "We've just received a statement from the Office of Federal Retail Integrity." David nodded. "They've been watching too." He turned to the crowd. "You see, I wasn't sent here by the company. I was sent through the company as part of a federal compliance audit for discriminatory labor practices." Gasps filled the room. One lawyer stood up. "That's classified." "No," David interrupted. "It was. But your lawyers leaked enough to make it public." He looked directly into the CEO's camera. "And now so will I." He placed a flash drive on the table. "Complete findings, verified, time-stamped, admissible." The CEO, who hadn't appeared until now, stood silently at the back of the room. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Everyone knew the ending was already written. A week later, Kyle was permanently terminated. Lantry's retirement was reclassified as resignation under internal ethics violation. 7 regional managers were replaced. David Brooks was appointed to lead a new division, ethical oversight and whistleblower advocacy. Jamal got promoted. Maria was reinstated with full back pay, and David's daughter, now a law student, sat in the front row of her father's first press conference. One final scene. David stood outside the same store that had once erased him. This time, he wasn't wearing a janitor's jumpsuit. He wore a black suit and a visitor badge. He stepped into the break room. Some old faces were still there, some new. He looked around and said, "I'm not here to inspect. I'm here to listen." Silence. Then someone asked, "Sir, who are you with?" He smiled. "With the people who used to get ignored." He paused. "And now we don't get ignored anymore.